Hello everyone, I'm Kshitis again from University of Connecticut. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering here, and my lab looks mostly in cancer and reproductive biology. So in the series of videos that I'm making about academia, about doing PhDs, how to traverse this life in PhD, I these are still early years, so very few subscribers, of course. But I want to tell you about a little incident that occurred to me while I had gone somewhere to give a talk. And that really opened my mind about, first of all, how privileged I am. And secondly, how academia is probably a very important refuge, a resting place, the happy place for so many people, in spite of what are otherwise considered as its disadvantages. There is a small percentage of people are very happy uh, being where they are in academia. And the more important thing is that not that they are happy, but they're miserable sometimes when they're outside. So let me tell you about this little incident that happened. I had gone for an invited talk to a different university in another part of the country. And I happened to, when I was coming back, I was picked up by the Uber driver, who, when he asked me who I was, I generally am very non-committal about my work, outside. I told him, well, I'm a scientist, and then he started telling me about all sorts of things. He clearly was a very knowledgeable person in terms of that he had gained a lot of information over the internet, but he was just not he was not just making stuff up. It was very clear that he understood things, and uh, he had read a lot, was able to put them in a meaningful, way of putting a lot of information together. uh, he said that he had some kind of a PTSD, and therefore he was very worried that he was always miserable. He was just unhappy all the time, and he thought that, it's just basically because the kind of work I was doing. He just started asking me, so what do you think about vagus nerve stimulation and other, things? And I asked him, well, first of all, I'm not in this field, but why are you talking about vagus nerve stimulation? Bear with me with the story. And he said that, well, I have this particular issue, and I want to just calm myself down. I'm always looking for patterns. And then he was telling me about all the other information that he had learned over the internet about what all kinds of, you know, uh, new diseases are there, and so on and so forth. And I told him, first of all, I told him, you see, I cannot really tell you much about what you're asking because this is not my domain of expertise by far. And more than I'm aware of what I am aware of, I'm certainly aware of what I'm not aware of. I know the limit of my knowledge. But let me ask you something totally different. And he was a little bit surprised because I was trying to veer away the conversation away from what he thought, he had this huge knowledge to share. And I asked him, what's going on? You seem to be pretty intelligent guy who's able to look through all this, and you're running this Uber drive. And then he opened up and he said, I just find patterns everywhere. At this point of time when I'm driving you, I know what the clouds are like. I know what's going on with the car. I also probably know many other things going around me. Clearly suggesting to me a person of a very neurodivergent, trait. Uh, but also, there are psychologically, there are some people who have this extreme, much more than the general population, ability to find patterns in disorder, uh, be comfortable with ambiguity, have a certain kind of, OCD sometimes. Uh, and these are probably different traits. I don't have much idea about neurodiversity. I don't have much idea about the psychological analysis of it. But what I told him was, that you're just in the wrong place. You need to be able to channelize your gift of finding these patterns properly. And I think that many a times we don't realize that how comforting it is for us that we are in a place where all of us around, people who are in academia, most of them have their PhDs, they have done higher education, and it is not that they are just trying to attain degrees. They are somehow comfortable in this situation, but they're able to channelize it properly, and therefore can meaningfully employ their gift for a purpose rather than making that tool of what is actually their gift of a certain nature their own enemy. And this appears to be the case happening with this person. And I was really wondering, what would have I had done personally if I were in that situation? I mean, I was privileged to have grown into a house where I could get proper education. And I was also privileged that I could go to a good institution and eventually was able to find my way into being a scientist. Uh, it is a very, very rare privilege, certainly from the place I come from. And I know many people in my own classes who had to pick up a job that they just had to earn the money. Uh, and I could have delayed it because my family wasn't dependent on me and so on and so forth. But the point is that what I told this guy was that you need to channelize your energy. You need to channelize your gift somewhere. Otherwise, you'll go mad. And it is not simply that, oh, you end up meeting people and talking about it. Because how many times can you go to meetups and just talk random stuff? You are just becoming a sponge of information. And earlier, just the process of gaining information used to take a lot of effort. You would need to go to the library, read a book and something. Now you just get processed information by AI and you can just fill your brain in. This is an easy thing. You can keep sitting on internet and reading all sorts of stuff and be happy about it. But it's not going to make you satisfied because you need to utilize a tool to some purpose. What could that purpose be? I don't know, but it could be anything. It could be painting, it could be music, it could be science, it could be dance, it could be writing, it could be podcasting, it could be anything where you are able to apply your capability to, your higher cognitive ability for a particular purpose. And science certainly provides that opportunity. Academia certainly provides that opportunity. It also provides an opportunity where you're surrounded by people somewhat of your own kind. It is not a condescending thing I'm saying. I'm not even, it's like, if you're a great sports fan, uh, lab may provide you an opportunity, but I, I'm generally very, very quiet when I am surrounded by my neighbors who come from all sorts of places, all walks of life, and they're talking about sports because I have very, very little interest in competitive sports. This is nothing to say about the people who have interest in competitive sports. Great, but if I don't have it, it's okay if you have to do it, once in a while. But if you're going to sit there every single day for 3 hours, 2 hours, you're going to get terribly bored and miserable. Um, and I know that very well about myself. So I am not even trying to get into that situation, right? But let's say you are in a situation because you are in a factory job or in a job that is repetitive, which does not give you that intellectual stimulation that you need in order to feed your brain. You will become miserable. I know personally I would become miserable without this particular ecosystem around me. So I think there are very many of us. There are about 10% of the people who are like us. Of course, some very gifted individuals with very high IQs are let's say more than 130, are probably 2% of the population. I've never checked my IQ. I don't really care very much about all that. But I understand that people of that nature who have a cognitive ability of a particular kind need to be in a place where their cognitive ability is usable in a very direct way. It's channelized for a purpose. It need not be academia. It could be music if that is where your interest is. It could be painting. It could be any art. And that's why I've always noticed great artists, good artist, because I personally am also have been a classical dancer, like a ballet type of classical dance from the Indian classical tradition. I know that people who have an intrinsic sense of art and sculpture or painting tend to have a particularly different capability of recognizing patterns, creating patterns, which most people don't get. I mean, they just get the final picture. But when you look at an artist painting that picture, the picture is coming out of it, it's emerging from the canvas, right? They're not like little children, drawing some hut and then painting the hut, inside a boundary. They are making layers and layers and layers. Even eventually, in layering and layering of that color, something emerges, right? Science is just like that. Music is just like that. Complex music is just like that. It's not Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with very single monochromatic tunes. But if you look at any kind of a classical music, you notice that there are layers and layers of music on top of each other. And something that emerges out of it is a totally different experience. People who have a sense of understanding that definitely have a very high cognitive ability, but they need to be there to channelize that cognitive ability. So, in my view, it is much more difficult to be a to be to be earning a living, being a musicologist or or painter or whatever. But academia provides a fairly approachable place for many people of that nature. There's another aspect to these people is that they are driven by an internal reward system. They are what are sometimes called apophenic, which is that their dopamine, this limbic system, that provides a dopamine in response to a pattern recognition that they can themselves do. It doesn't really require an external, uh, you know, uh, peer or external validation. They don't really care about what other people are thinking about them. I know I am like that, and actually, I know many people like me uh, around me because I am surrounded by such people all the time who are driven by an internal reward. Finding a pattern fills them with a sense of joy that an outsider would think, are they really stupid? I mean, are they really what's there to be happy about this, right? What's there to be happy when, oh, I found this particular, cell doing this crazy behavior or this very interesting behavior, which, if you look from outside, looks so simple and hardly something to be happy about. But I know, and if you are doing a PhD, you know that finding pattern fills you up with a certain reward. Uh, I think it is just the nature of these people. Some people have this ability, and it is not that it is any better or worse, but it is a tool. It is some kind of it's some kind of a gift which can become your enemy if you are not in a place where you keep finding these patterns and able to make sense of it. I mean, you could be in trading, you could be in finance and do the same thing. And that's totally fine. I mean, many of my college mates who are probably like me in many ways, went into finance, went into IT, did startups, and basically they are also living a very, very similar life. They're intellectually stimulated, surrounded by people who are intellectually stimulated, have a very high cognitive ability, and really don't care very much about success beyond the fact that they are able to build it, they are able to channelize it. Okay, so I know this video got a little longer, but what I mean to say is that if you are a person of that nature, you will find it very miserable if you are not in a place where that kind of intellectual stimulation is present. So academia is a very, very good place for you for that reason. And if for that reason alone, and if you go outside, think about it. Look for places where you continue to get that kind of stimulation because it is necessary in life, to be constantly stimulated, particularly for the people of this nature. So I think this conversation really opened up that actually I'm very much like probably that guy was. It is just that I was lucky enough to be in a place where I'm not miserable uh, because of uh, my own way of developing a cognitive understanding of the world, but actually can channelize it for something meaningful. And I hope that more and people of that nature are able to find such a refuge for themselves. So take care and wait for till the next video.